It was a warm morning in Chennai. The sun climbed over the red rooftops, and the city buzzed with its usual energy. But inside one quiet home on a narrow street, something unusual was happening. Cameras were being set up, chairs arranged, flowers placed in neat rows. Today, a national event was taking place not in a grand stadium or a shiny hall, but in the modest courtyard of the Pichai family. The air was thick with excitement. Reporters whispered, local children peeked through the gates, and security officers stood alert. The Prime Minister himself, Narendra Modi, was coming to honor one of India's most inspiring sons, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. Everyone expected a ceremony of praise. They expected speeches about achievement, technology, and the power of dreams. But no one expected what actually happened. No one expected silence to hold so much power, and no one expected a mother's simple words to carry more weight than all the awards in the world. The house looked small from the outside, its walls faded with age, its gate creaking when opened. But the moment Sundar stepped out with his mother, Lakshmi Pichai, the entire space felt alive with meaning. Sundar wore a simple kurta, white with blue trim. He walked slowly, with quiet respect, holding his mother's hand as if he were still a boy. Lakshmi wore a soft sari, pale green, her hair tied back neatly. Her eyes scanned the crowd, calm but alert. The Prime Minister arrived moments later. The black cars stopped. His team stepped out first. Then Modi appeared, smiling, his hands joined in greeting. The crowd clapped. Some chanted slogans. Others stood quietly, unsure of what this moment meant. When Sundar and Modi met, they shook hands. Then Sundar gently stepped aside and introduced his mother. "This is my Amma," he said, softly. Lakshmi Pichai stepped forward, folding her hands in namaste. Modi smiled and nodded. Then he asked a simple question. A question meant to open a conversation, to show warmth. He said, "How did you raise such a brilliant son?" And for a moment, there was no reply. Lakshmi did not answer right away. She looked at him. Then she looked at the crowd. She looked at her son. Her hand still held his. The silence grew longer. Reporters leaned forward. Sundar glanced at his mother. She was not nervous. She was thinking, remembering. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and soft. "I didn't raise a brilliant son," she said. "I raised a kind one." The crowd fell completely silent. Not even the birds chirped. Modi's smile faded for a moment. He looked at her, confused. Then, thoughtful, Lakshmi continued. "He was not always top of his class. We didn't always have money for books. But he shared whatever he had. Once he gave his only school lunch to a girl who had nothing. He walked home hungry, and he didn't tell me until years later. He thought I would scold him." Modi blinked, his eyes narrowing slightly. His hand lowered. "He used to listen when others shouted," Lakshmi said, "and when he learned something new, he taught others. His success is not just his. It belongs to everyone who helped him and everyone he helped." Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. The audience was still. Even the Prime Minister, a man who had given speeches in front of millions, now stood quietly, unsure what to say. Sundar's head was lowered slightly, eyes full. Then Lakshmi looked directly at Modi. "You ask how I raised him," she said. "I didn't. I just gave him space to become who he already was. I didn't stop him when he chose patience over pride. I didn't pull him back when others told me to push him harder. I trusted him, even when the world didn't." It was then that Modi stepped back slightly. He didn't speak. He just nodded slowly, deeply. No one clapped. Not yet. The weight of her words had not lifted. And then Modi turned to Sundar and said, "You have honored your mother more than any award, Kim." The cameras didn't capture a dramatic hug. They captured something deeper. Sundar took his mother's hand again. She didn't look at the press. She didn't care about the praise. She looked at her son and gave a slight nod, but that moment, Mother's quiet truth spread like fire. People started sharing the clip, not because it was loud, but because it was real. That day a new kind of pride grew in the hearts of many, not just for success, but for simplicity, not just for being famous, but for being good. And that was only the beginning. After the event, people across the country began talking, not about technology or the Prime Minister's words, but about Lakshmi Pichai. Her calm voice, her quiet strength, and her powerful replies spread across phones and television screens like a soft wind that carried something rare. Truth. In one village, a school teacher played the clip to his students. In a city apartment, a young girl wrote her mother a letter for the first time. And in a hospital waiting room, an old man wiped his eyes without knowing why. Something in Lakshmi's words had touched them, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. Back in Chennai, the house was quiet again. The flowers were gone. The cameras had left. Sundar sat with his mother on the veranda, sipping tea. The late afternoon sun stretched golden lines across the floor. Lakshmi looked at her son. "You didn't eat properly today." Sundar smiled. "You noticed." "I always notice," she said, taking another sip. "Even when you don't speak." There was a long pause. Sundar looked at the small garden, then back at his mother. "Oma, do you remember the old wooden box you used to keep locked?" Lakshmi raised her eyebrows. "The one near the sewing machine." "Yes." "Is it still there?" Lakshmi nodded slowly. "Go look." Inside the house, Sundar walked past faded photos, a bookshelf with dog-eared novels, and a clay pot in the corner. He stopped near the sewing machine, untouched for years. He reached behind it and pulled out the wooden box. The lock was rusty. He tapped it twice, and it popped open. Inside were small memories, a pair of broken glasses, a few letters tied with red thread, a folded report card, a photograph of a young boy sitting alone beneath a tree, and at the very bottom, a yellowing envelope. Sundar held it for a moment. His name was written on it, in his father's handwriting. He brought it outside and sat beside his mother again. "I never opened this." Lakshmi looked down at the envelope. "I know. Your Appa wrote it before he passed. He asked me to give it to you when the time felt right. I didn't know if it ever would." Sundar carefully opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Tamil. His hands shook slightly as he began to read aloud. "My dear son, I may not be here to see the man you become, but I already see the boy you are. I have watched you give more than you take, listen more than you speak, and try even when the world pushes you down. There will be a day when people ask about your success. They will want to know the story behind your name. But I want you to remember your name matters less than your silence when others shout, your calm when others rush. You will rise, but never forget to bend low enough to lift someone else. Be kind, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And remember, your mother is stronger than she knows. Listen to her. She carries more light than the world can see." Appa Sundar couldn't speak. His throat tightened. The paper trembled in his hand. Lakshmi reached over and placed her hand on his. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The silence between them was filled with the voice of a man long gone. The sun had dipped below the roof. Birds chirped, faintly in the background. After some time, Sundar whispered. I forgot his voice, but this brings it back. Lakshmi nodded slowly. He believed in you. Not for what you'd do, but for who you are. That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. The letter stayed beside his pillow. He thought about the past. The days he went to school, barefoot. The times he borrowed books from the neighbor because they couldn't afford their own. The time his mother skipped dinner so he could eat. Success had taken him far. To Silicon Valley. 2 rooms full of power and prestige. But tonight, under the small fan that buzzed above, it all came back to a wooden box and a father's quiet. Words. The next morning, Sundar made a decision. He called his assistant. I'm staying in India for a little longer. The assistant sounded surprised. Sir, there's a board meeting in 2 days. Reschedule it, he said. Tell them it's important. He had somewhere to go. Not to a hotel, not to a conference, but to a school. Later that week, Sundar and Lakshmi visited the school where he first studied. The building had cracked walls and faded paint, but the laughter of children made it feel bright. A teacher greeted them. Her eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Pichai here. Yes, Sundar smiled. I was once a boy in your classroom. She looked closer and gasped. You were the one who built the paper rocket that hit my glasses. Lakshmi laughed. He still remembers that. The children gathered around, curious. Sundar knelt and sat on the ground with them. He didn't speak about success. He asked them about their dreams. One boy wanted to be a bus driver. One girl, a painter. Another said he didn't know. That's okay, Sundar said. I didn't know either when I was your age. Then he told them about the paper rocket, about the hunger, about the silence. Not to impress them, but to tell the truth. The teacher wiped a tear. Lakshmi stood beside the blackboard, watching quietly. And then something unexpected happened. A girl stood up, holding a small notebook. Sir, she said, will you read my poem? Sundar smiled. Of course. She walked over and handed it to him. He read it aloud. The poem was about a tree that lost all its leaves in winter, but stood tall through storms. You are that tree, the girl said softly. The whole room was silent. Lakshmi stepped forward and placed her hand on the girl's head. You will grow strong, she whispered. And in that small school, something powerful happened. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a trending video, but it was real, and it mattered, because sometimes the most important stories are the quiet ones. The sun was still rising when Lakshmi stepped outside to sweep the front courtyard. The morning breeze carried the smell of jasmine and hot idlis from a nearby kitchen. Life had returned to normal, or at least it seemed that way. But something small had shifted inside the house. The letter from Sundar's father had opened old memories like doors long shut. Now, those memories were whispering against soft voices from years past. Inside, Sundar was sitting by the window, holding a cup of tea. He was dressed simply again. No blazer, no tie, just like he had been back then. As he sipped slowly, his eyes wandered to the gate. Amma, he said gently, do you remember a boy named Murugan? Lakshmi looked up from her sweeping. Murugan, she paused. Thin, always quiet. Used to live 2 houses down. Yes, the one who never wore slippers. Even in the heat, Lakshmi's hands froze for a second. How could I forget? Sundar nodded slowly. He shared his rice with me once when we had nothing for dinner. Lakshmi's eyes softened. You never told me. I didn't want to. He told me not to tell anyone. He said, if your mother finds out, she might return it. Lakshmi smiled faintly. He was right. Sundar stood up and looked out the window again. I don't know why he's in my head now. I just feel like I should find him. Lakshmi didn't question it. She just nodded and said, go. Sundar didn't have an address, just an old memory of a dusty lane, a small home with cracked walls, and a boy with shy eyes. He walked through the streets of his childhood, accompanied by a local reporter who had offered to help. People recognized Sundar, but he didn't stop for photos. He kept asking one question. Do you remember Murugan? Most shook their heads. A few smiled and said, he moved years ago. One old man said, he used to sell flowers near the temple. After hours of asking, they reached the temple. An old priest there said Murugan. Yes, he used to help clean the steps. Good boy. He left for the city after his mother died. Last I heard, he worked at a garage near Dapit. They thanked the priest and hurried on. The garage was small and hidden behind a row of shops. Oil stains covered the floor. A few scooters were parked outside. Inside, a man was crouched, fixing a tire. He wore faded clothes, hands blackened with grease. His hair was thinner now, but those eyes, those shy, warm eyes were still there. Murugan, Sundar asked quietly. The man turned, startled. He wiped his hands on a rag and stared. Do I know you? He said slowly. It's me. Sundar Murugan blinked, then looked again. His lips parted. He stood up. Sundar Pichai. Sundar nodded. Murugan dropped the rag. You came back. I came looking for you. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Murugan shook his head. You became a big man. I saw you on TV once. I didn't believe it was the same Sundar who shared half a banana with you behind the water tank. Sundar smiled. Murugan laughed suddenly. A warm, honest sound. Yes, I remember. The garage workers nearby paused, confused. Can we talk? Sundar asked. Murugan nodded. Come. They walked to a nearby tea stall. It was simple plastic chairs, metal cups, and the smell of cardamom. As they sat, Sundar leaned forward. You gave me food when we had none. I never forgot that. Murugan looked down. It was nothing. It was everything, Sundar said softly. You fed me when no one else knew. And I want to know, how are you now? Really? Murugan hesitated. I work. I survive. I have a small place. One daughter. Smart girl. I try to send her to school. Sundar listened quietly. Murugan sighed. Sometimes I wonder what could have been, but then, I remind myself, some of us are meant to build ladders, others are meant to climb. Sundar shook his head. No, that's not how I see it. You built a step for me once, and now, it's my turn. Murugan looked confused. What do you mean? I want to help, Sundar said. Not charity. Not pity. Respect. Your daughter deserves the same chance I got. Maybe more. Murugan blinked. Why me? Because when I had nothing, you gave something. Now that I have everything, I want to give it back. The next day, Lakshmi sat across from Murugan at the Pichai house. She served him food on a banana leaf, just like she did for guests long ago. You're part of our story, she said. You always were. Murugan wiped his eyes silently. His daughter Priya sat beside him, bright, nervous. Sundar handed her a tablet. This is for you, he said. Study well, and when you grow up, lift someone else. She looked up at him, like you did. He nodded. Exactly. Lakshmi watched from behind her glasses. Her eyes were soft, but her voice was clear. Kindness never dies, she said. It just waits, and then it returns. Later that night, Sundar received a message. A local newspaper wanted to write a story, titled, The CEO and the Mechanic. He declined. Write instead about Murugan and Priya, he said. I'm just a small part of their story. As the world praised his humility, Sundar sat with his mother once more. I found him Amma, he said. Lakshmi smiled. I know. How? Because the good we give never gets lost. It always finds its way back. And just like that, another chapter closed. But the story was far from over. Because kindness, once awakened, begins to move faster than fame. And in the next part, an unexpected guest will knock on their door, carrying a truth long buried, and a name that Sundar had almost forgotten. 3 days passed since Murugan and Priya shared a meal with the Pichai family. Each evening brought quiet joy to the small house, simple dinners, laughter, old memories, and the kind of peace that money cannot buy. But on the 4th morning, as the crows cawed outside and the milkman rang the bell, something unexpected happened. Lakshmi opened the front gate and paused. An old man stood there, wearing a faded white shirt tucked into loose trousers. His sandals were worn thin, and a cloth bag hung from his shoulder. His back was slightly bent, and his hair had turned completely white. But his eyes, his sharp, searching eyes, had not aged a day. Lakshmi gasped softly. Krishna, sir. The man folded his hands. Vanakkam, Lakshmi. Her voice trembled. You're alive? He nodded. Barely. but still here. From inside, Sundar heard the commotion and came out. The moment he saw the man, he froze. His breath caught in his throat. "Sir." The man looked up. "Sundar." Just one word. But it held years of emotion. Sundar rushed forward and touched the old man's feet. Krishna Sir shook his head. "Don't do that. Stand up. I'm not your god. I'm just a man who once shouted too much in class." Lakshmi helped them both inside, her eyes still wide with disbelief. They sat in the small living room. Krishna Sir looked around. "This house hasn't changed much. Neither have you," Lakshmi said softly. Sundar finally asked the question. "Where did you go, sir? You disappeared after my final year. No one knew what happened." Krishna Sir looked down at his hands. "I fell," he said. "Not physically, but in life. My wife passed away. I had no children, and my health broke. I left the city. I didn't want anyone to see me like that. For years, I lived in a small village. Just me and a few books." Lakshmi placed a hand over her mouth. "I heard about you only recently," Krishna Sir continued, looking at Sundar. "Someone showed me a video. You and your mother. What she said about kindness." His voice trembled. "I taught you science, but I never taught you that." Sundar shook his head. "No, sir. You taught me something deeper. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Krishna Sir smiled faintly. "I remember the time you brought me a broken radio. Said you wanted to fix it." Sundar chuckled. "I remember. You gave me your only working screwdriver, and you ruined it." Krishna Sir laughed. "I did." They both laughed now. But then Krishna Sir's face turned serious. "I want to confess something," he said. "Something I've carried for years." Sundar leaned forward. "Do you remember your scholarship form? The one that helped you go to IT?" "Of course," Sundar said. And I filled it in the living room." "Yes," Krishna Sir said. "But it was rejected. The first time." Sundar blinked. "What? You didn't know?" "But the officer said the family income was too high by 200 rupees. I knew it wasn't true. I went to the office myself the next day. I spoke to the principal, and I adjusted the form. I made sure your name stayed." Sundar sat in stunned silence. Lakshmi's hands trembled. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. "Because it wasn't about me," Krishna Sir said. "It was about him, and what the world would lose if he didn't get the chance." He looked at Sundar. "I never asked for thanks. I never wanted recognition. I just wanted to see what you'd become." A single tear slipped from Sundar's eye. He got up, walked over, and knelt in front of his old teacher. "I owe everything to that form," he said, "and to the man who made sure it went through." "No," Krishna Sir said. "You owe it to yourself. You were always meant for more." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence filled with years of unspoken truth. Then Lakshmi said, "You're not going back to that village." "What?" "You'll stay here," she said. "This is your home now." "But no," but Sundar added, "we have a room ready, and a library." Krishna Sir chuckled. "You're still that stubborn boy, aren't you?" "Only when it matters," Sundar said. Over the next few days, Krishna Sir became part of the household. He read books in the garden. He helped Priya with her homework. He even taught the neighborhood children on Sundays. Word spread. People came not to meet the Google CEO, but to meet the man who taught him. They asked questions, listened to his stories, laughed at his jokes. One evening, Sundar arranged a small gathering in the school auditorium. He stood on stage, wearing a simple white shirt. The lights dimmed. "Today," he said, "I want to introduce you to the reason I ever had a chance." He turned and held out his hand. Krishna Sir stepped up, slowly but proudly. The audience stood. Every student, every teacher, every parent stood in respect. "He saved my future with a single form," Sundar said. And with years of belief, Krishna Sir didn't speak. He just looked out into the crowd. Then he turned to Sundar. "You've done more than I ever dreamed," he whispered. "But your greatest gift is this. You came back." After the event, someone from the education board approached Sundar. "We want to name a scholarship after your teacher," they said. "Will you approve?" Sundar smiled. "Only if he agrees." They turned to Krishna, "Sir." He paused, then said softly, "Name it after every forgotten teacher." That night, as the stars lit the sky above Chennai, Sundar, Lakshmi, and Krishna, Sir, sat on the veranda. They didn't talk about Google. They didn't talk about awards. They talked about small things. A borrowed pen, a failed exam, a broken radio, because sometimes the smallest moments carry the biggest meaning. And as Krishna Sir leaned back and looked at the sky, he said, "I don't have children of my own, but now I feel like I do." Lakshmi reached out and touched his shoulder. "You always did. You just didn't know." The morning started like any other. Birds fluttered around the neem tree outside. The city stirred awake with the sound of buses, vendors, and temple bells. Inside the Pichai house, Lakshmi was folding clothes while Krishna Sir sipped tea and hummed an old song. Sundar was helping Priya with her science homework when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was from the Prime Minister's office. Invitation, National Honor Event, Delhi, keynote speaker required. Sundar Pichai to be awarded Bharat Sewaratna. His hand paused. Laksh. I looked up. "What is it?" Sundar read the message aloud. Everyone went silent. Krishna Sir blinked slowly. "They want you to speak." "Yes, and, will you?" Sundar hesitated. He had stood on stages around the world. He had spoken to presidents, inventors, and dreamers. But something about this felt different. "I don't know," he whispered. Lakshmi placed the folded sari on the table. "Why?" "Because they expect something grand," Sundar said. "Big words, achievements, numbers. But everything that matters to me now is small. It's soft. It's quiet. Like you, Uma. Like Murugan. Like Krishna Sir." Krishna Sir leaned forward. "But sometimes, soft truths need big stages." After a day of thinking, Sundar said yes. The news spread fast. Television channels flashed his face. Reporters camped outside the house again. Children waved signs saying, "You make India proud." The day before the trip, Sundar sat with Lakshmi. He said, "I want you to come with me." She looked startled. "Me? Why?" "Because you're the reason I'm going. And if I have to say anything, I want you there." Lakshmi hesitated. "People will stare. Let them." The flight to Delhi was quiet. Sundar sat by the window. Lakshmi sat beside him, holding his hand gently as the plane landed. They looked out over the capital city. Cars, lights, sirens, buildings reaching up to the clouds. Lakshmi whispered, "So many people, so many stories. And tonight, soon, said one of them will be ours." The venue was vast. Golden lights bathed the grand auditorium. Red carpets lined the floors. Officials, diplomats, and dignitaries filled the hall. The Prime Minister sat at the front, his expression calm and watchful. Backstage, Sundar stood in silence. His speech rested in his jacket pocket, carefully typed, edited by professionals, approved by advisors. But it didn't feel right. Lakshmi stood beside him, adjusting his collar like she did when he was a boy. "Are you ready?" she asked. He looked at her, unsure. "No." "Good," she smiled. "That means you'll speak from your heart." He took a deep breath. The announcer's voice echoed, "Please welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Sundar Pichai." The hall erupted in applause. Sundar walked on stage slowly. He reached the podium, looked at the crowd, then looked down at his speech. He folded it and placed it in his pocket. The hall grew quiet. He spoke without a script. "Thank you for this honor. But today, I want to share a story instead of a success." He paused. "When I was 10, We couldn't afford a second notebook. So my Oma tore the unused pages from her old recipes and stitched them into a book for me. When I was 13, a friend named Murugan gave me his rice when I had none. And when I was 17, my teacher, Krishna Sir, walked across town to save my scholarship. He glanced at them in the front row, Lakshmi, tearful but steady. Krishna Sir, still. Murugan and Priya, invited as guests, sitting in quiet awe. Everything I am comes from their kindness. He looked at the Prime Minister. Now? You asked a question once. How did my mother raise a brilliant son? He smiled gently. She didn't. She raised a good human. One who fails, who forgets, who falls but who always gets up. The hall was silent. No camera clicked. No phone buzzed. So tonight, I return this honor to its real owners, Sundar said. To every mother who went hungry so her child could eat. To every teacher who stayed behind to explain a problem one more time. To every friend who gave without asking for anything back. He paused again. Then he said something no one expected. And to the children watching this from small homes, with leaky roofs and big dreams, don't chase greatness. Chase goodness. Greatness will follow. The crowd stood, not because they were told to but because they wanted to. The applause was long, not loud, but deep. When Sundar walked down from the stage, he didn't go to the cameras. He went to Lakshmi, and he said quietly, I did my best. She wiped his cheek with the edge of her sorry. You always do. After the event, Modi came forward. He shook Sundar's hand, then turned to Lakshmi. He folded his hands deeply. You've taught the nation something we have forgotten. Lakshmi smiled. Sometimes silence teaches more than speeches. Modi nodded, and for the second time, the Prime Minister of India stood speechless in front of a mother. That night, in the hotel room, Sundar sat on the balcony. The city lights flickered like stars. Lakshmi sat beside him, holding a cup of warm milk. Amma, Sundar said, why do you think they listened? Lakshmi sipped and said, because you told the truth, and truth, when spoken softly, travels the farthest. Far away, in a small school, a girl who had never heard of Google watched the speech on a tiny phone. She looked at her mother and whispered, I want to be like him. Her mother replied, then be kind. A week had passed since Sundar gave the speech in Delhi. His words still echoed across classrooms, homes, and office desks. Clips of Lakshmi's quiet nod went more viral than any celebrity smile. Newspapers didn't just talk about technology. Now they spoke of truth, humility, and mothers who raised sons with character instead of ambition. But in the Pichai home, things were simple again. The veranda was back to hosting quiet tea times. Krishna Sir taught local children by drawing circuits in the dust. Priya read books under the neem tree. Murugan started fixing fans for neighbors without asking for money. And Lakshmi returned to the rhythm she had always known, waking early, cooking with care, and humming old songs. Sundar, however, felt something unsettled inside. Not pain, not doubt, something unfinished. One evening, he sat beside Lakshmi as she lit the lamp near the old family photo. Amma, he said softly, do you still have Apis things? Lakshmi paused. Yes, some are in the attic, untouched. Can I go see? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. The attic wasn't a room. It was more of a crawl space above the back of the house. A wooden ladder led up to it, creaking with each step. Sunlight entered through a small crack in the wall, casting lines of gold across dust-covered boxes. Sundar climbed up carefully, flashlight in hand. The smell of old paper and cloth filled the space. He found an old typewriter, a box of tools, a broken radio, his first one. He smiled, and then something caught his eye. A wooden frame, wrapped in newspaper. He opened it. It was a mirror, simple, oval-shaped, with a carved wooden border. The glass was slightly worn, but still clear. He stared into it. Etched on the back was a small line in Tamil. He read it aloud. To see your future, look at what reflects your past. His breath caught. He turned the mirror in his hands, slowly, and then he remembered. He was 9 years old, sitting on his father's lap. They were in this attic. His father had lifted this very mirror and asked him, "What do you see?" "Me," Sundar had said. "Look again," his father had said. "Do you see your mother's care, your teacher's time, your friend's smile? Because none of us rise alone. We are reflections of every kindness shown to us." He had forgotten that moment. Until now, Sundar sat there, holding the mirror, his reflection blurry through the dust. But now, he saw it all. Murugan, Krishna Sir, Lakshmi, even the Prime Minister's silent nod. They weren't just parts of his story, they were his story. He brought the mirror down carefully. Lakshmi saw it and covered her mouth. "You found it. Do you remember what Appa said about it?" Sundar asked. She nodded slowly. "He called it the truth mirror. I want to hang it in the living room," Sundar said, "so every guest can see it." Lakshmi smiled. "And see themselves." "Yes, and see all of you too." The next day, the mirror was placed above the bookshelf. No golden frame, no fancy design, but everyone who looked into it paused. One child saw herself holding a book. A mother saw herself resting, finally proud. Murugan looked in and saw, not a mechanic but a giver. Krishna Sir smiled at the reflection of an old teacher still shaping young minds. And Lakshmi, she looked in, and for the first time, saw not just a mother, but a builder of futures. That evening, Sundar received a letter, handwritten, no stamp, just slid under the door. He opened it. "Dear Sundar, I watched your speech. I listened to every word, not because you are famous, but because you reminded me of something I forgot long ago, that what we build in others lasts longer than what we build for ourselves. I was once your classmate. I failed twice. I dropped out. But today, because of your words, I enrolled in night school. I want to try again. Thank you. You changed one more life. No name, no return address, just quiet truth." Sundar folded the letter and placed it inside the wooden box, the one that once held his father's letter. He added a note of his own. The world doesn't need louder voices. It needs deeper echoes. On the last night of his stay, Sundar sat beside Lakshmi on the rooftop. The stars above Chennai blinked gently. "Amma," he said, "will I ever come back here and feel like before?" Lakshmi took his hand. "You won't, and you shouldn't," she said. "You've changed. But so has the world around you. Then what do I hold on to?" She looked at him, her voice soft. "Hold on to who you are when no one is looking." He nodded. The wind whispered through the trees, and for once, there was no doubt, no weight, just peace. The next morning, Sundar packed his bag as he stepped. Outside, Priya ran up and hugged him. "Will you come again?" she asked. "Always," he smiled. "Because home is not a place, it's a person, or two, or 10. Murugan nodded. Krishna Sir gave a quiet blessing. Lakshmi placed a small red mark on his forehead. "Go," she said, "and carry us with you." As the car drove away, Sundar looked back one last time. The mirror glinted in the morning sun, and for a moment, he saw it all again, not his face, but every hand that lifted him, every voice that shaped him, every heart that loved him without asking for anything in return, and he knew this was the real story, not the one the world celebrated, but the one that built him from the inside out. The world moved fast as it always does. Headlines changed, seasons turned, and cities shifted from one celebration to another. But in one small corner of Chennai, the rhythm of life remained quiet and steady. And in that quiet space, Lakshmi Pichai continued to water her plants each morning. Krishna Sir continued to guide neighborhood children, and Priya Murugan's daughter began topping her class. Sundar had returned to California. Board meetings, tech innovations, world leaders, headlines. Yet something within him had changed. No one saw it, but everyone felt it. His voice was softer. His eyes stayed longer on people's faces. His answers came slower and kinder. The trip home had planted something in him that no city, no salary, no success had ever managed before, a rooted sense of who he truly was. One cold morning, he sat in his office overlooking the Golden Bay. Behind him, sunlight glowed on awards and photographs, but in front of him, pinned to a soft board, was a handwritten note in Tamil. The anonymous letter. He read it each day. It reminded him that the work he did mattered not because it was global, but because it could be deeply personal. That day, as he scrolled through updates on his tablet, one message caught his attention. It came from a village school in Kerala. Dear Sir, inspired by your story, our students created a project called Mirror Moments. They interview elders in the village and write their life lessons on mirrors, donated by the community. Each mirror now carries a truth. Thank you for showing us the way. He smiled. Something so simple had begun to echo across places he'd never been. Later that week, Sundar flew to New York for a tech summit. At the end of his talk, a young woman approached him. She wore a green scarf and carried a worn leather journal. Double quotes, "Sir," she said. "Nervous. I came from Pakistan. My parents didn't want me to study engineering. They said it wasn't for girls. But my mother saw your story, your mother's words, and she changed her mind. Now I'm in my second year. Thank you." Sundar stood still. So many borders, so many beliefs, and yet one simple act of truth had crossed it all. In another city, in another time zone, Krishna Sir sat under the neem tree in Chennai, teaching a young boy how to build a fan using batteries and cardboard. Lakshmi came out with 2 glasses of lime water. She smiled as she watched them. Double quotes, "Sir," the boy said. "Do you know the man who fixed Google?" Krishna Sir laughed. "Yes, but more importantly, I know the boy who once broke everything trying to fix it." They both laughed. Meanwhile, Priya stood at her school assembly, giving a speech about her dreams. She didn't say, "I want to be like Sundar Pichai." She said, "I want to become the kind of person who helps someone else become Sundar Pichai." The teachers cried. Her classmates clapped. One night, back in California, Sundar was invited to speak at a high-level event. He stood on stage, the lights warm on his face, and said, "We talk a lot about changing the world, but I've learned that the world is made of small homes, quiet mothers, patient teachers, and one act of kindness at a time. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more humans who listen." Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it, a mirror, not large, not shiny, just a simple, oval-shaped mirror. "This was my father's," he said. "He called it the truth mirror. Today, I want to give it to someone who reminds me of that same truth." He walked down the stage and handed it to a janitor, named Maria, who had worked at the company's office for 20 years, and was known for keeping the night shift staff awake with her songs. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why me?" he smiled. "Because your kindness doesn't need a title." The hall stood silent, and then stood together, not in applause, but in quiet understanding. Sundar flew back to India a month later. This time, no media followed him, no ceremonies, just a simple visit to his mother. He sat with her on the floor, helping her cut vegetables. Double quotes, AMMA. He said, "I want to tell our story someday." Lakshmi didn't look up. "What story?" "This one," he said. "You, Appa Murugan, Krishna, Sir, the mirror, everything." She smiled. "If you must tell it," she said, "then don't make it about how far you've gone. What should I make it about?" She looked at him. "Make it about how far you were loved." He nodded. He understood. And that's how the story ends. Not with applause, or awards, or headlines, but with a quiet truth that never needed permission to be powerful. It ends with a mother's wisdom. a teacher's faith, a friend's kindness, and a mirror that keeps reflecting the goodness in us all. Because in the end, success fades, but kindness echoes, and if you listen closely, you'll hear it still, in every home, in every heart, in every heart, in every child who dares to dream not just of rising, but of lifting others as they do.